What's up, JDF? It is your boy Kearns, and I am going to give you my playoff predictions. Now, we saw some play-in games already. So the Warriors are the 7th seed, the Magic are the 7th seed. We saw that all happen. We still have one more play-in game left. We have Memphis and Dallas, and we have Miami and Atlanta. Now, before I get into all the stuff I want to talk about with the play-in and then the rest of the playoffs, I want you guys to make sure you follow and subscribe. So follow our Twitch at JDF Sports. Go subscribe to our YouTube. Actually, subscribe to Twitch, too. Subscribe to YouTube at JDF Sports Network. And then, if you haven't heard, maybe you have heard, maybe you haven't heard, but if you haven't heard, we have an official JDF Discord, JDF Sports. Make sure you go and join that. We've got plenty of discussions going on. We're talking basketball, football, gaming. We talk jerseys over there. We talk everything over there. So make sure you guys definitely go and join that. Now, all that being said, let's get into the playoffs here. So we had a little recap. Atlanta Magic beat the Atlanta Hawks. Not surprised by that. I kind of expected that to happen. Would have been more surprised had the Hawks won. I think that the Magic are a team that are just flat out better. I'm kind of surprised they were so low in the standings. I kind of thought they were going to be higher going into this year. I think that team is pretty talented. Obviously, they had some games during the regular season where they were missing a lot of key guys. Franz Wagner missed some games. Paolo Banchero missed some games. So I think had that team been fully healthy, they may be looking at a higher seed. They may have missed the play-in. They may have made the playoffs right out. And then going over to the West, Golden State beat Memphis. Again, that one wasn't super surprising. You have Steph Curry. They traded for Jimmy Butler. They have Draymond Green. So I think the combination of having those two highly defensive guys and then obviously one of the greatest to ever do it in Steph Curry, I think that's just too much for Memphis. So I'm not really surprised with how that shaped out. Now, looking at the two games we have remaining in the play-in tournament, we have the Grizzlies versus the Mavericks. I'm going to start in the West now. Now, this is an interesting game, because we just saw maybe like a month ago, a few weeks ago, we saw the Grizzlies fire their head coach. Now, it's going to be kind of weird going into a game like this with a new-ish head coach. And we know, obviously, the Mavericks were surrounded in probably the biggest controversy, one of the biggest controversies the NBA has seen in a long time, in the Luka Doncic trade, where they traded Luka for AD. But you got to remember, they have AD. AD is the best player in this game. I think right now he's still better than Ja. I don't think Ja is a better player than him. So if he can really show that he's the best player and show his dominance on the offense and the defense like we know he can, I think the Mavericks are going to take this and they'll be making that 8th seed. Now, they obviously don't have Kyrie Irving. They obviously have the corpse of Klay Thompson playing. But I do think that stopping AD is going to be really difficult for the Grizzlies, even though they do have Triple J. I just don't know if that is enough for them to really contain AD. Plus, I think you have to look at this Mavericks team and you know that they're playing for a reason. So many people are looking at this team and doubting them because of that Luka trade. And I think especially AD is looking at this as an opportunity for him to show that he's here. He's the guy. He wants to show that they traded for him for a reason, so expect him to come out, have a really big game. We'll see what Ja does. We'll see what Triple J does. Obviously, the Grizzlies have a little bit more distractions going on with, again, the head coach firing and now all of this stuff going on with Ja and his celebrations, and whether or not that's going to lead to being more of like a push for them or it's going to be a distraction, we have yet to see. But I think it's going to lean more towards being a distraction. Now, going over to the other side with the East, we have Atlanta and Miami. And now this one's going to be a real interesting one because these are two teams that are kind of, I mean, they're not very good. They're not super bad. I mean, Miami needed almost a 40-point performance from Tyler Hero to get past Chicago. And the Hawks lost to the Magic, which, again, I kind of expected. But I think Trey getting ejected from that game, again, that's one of those things where he could look at that and use it as fuel. But I don't know, man. I think Atlanta is at a point now where this is kind of like they need to make a decision on their future and whether or not Trae Young is their future or if they're going to move on from him and try to go somewhere else. Because they made the conference finals a few years ago when they lost to the Bucks. But other than that, they've really not made much noise in the playoffs. Trae Young has shown that he can produce at a very high level and have really good stat lines, but doesn't always turn into wins. And, the Hawks have never been like a super, super talented team in Trae Young's tenure, but he's definitely had some guys on his team that could play, and at least some guys to maybe make a push in the playoffs if he's truly that guy. And I think that this year we'll see what happens in the playoffs. I think this year I would not be surprised should they lose to the Heat and miss out on the playoffs completely. I would not be shocked if there was a Trae Young move some point in the future, like very soon, like this offseason or early next season. And to add on to that, I wouldn't be surprised if Trae decided to say, hey, you know what? I don't want to be here anymore. We're not winning games. All we do is lose and stay in mediocrity. Obviously, they had the first pick last year, and they got Zachary Versace, which great. Cool, you got a nice young player, but that draft is arguably one of the weakest drafts we've had in years, and it's probably going to be weaker than the draft we have upcoming, obviously, with Cooper Flagg and guys like that. So, looking at this one, that all being said, this one's really tough. This one is really tough. I was going to say the Hawks, but like Miami still has guys who can give Trae trouble on the defensive end. And if Tyler Hero shows up to play again, if Tyler Hero comes and he shows up to play, I think the Heat win. But if Tyler Hero has an okay game, say he scores 15 to 20 points, I don't think they win. He's going to have another heroic performance again, or they're just simply not going to win. So I actually do lean Atlanta a little bit on this one. Again, I think Trae Young still has something to prove. I think he still wants to show that his amazing season that he had this year isn't just for naught and that he's going to make the playoffs. That being said, as we move on to the play-in, so just to recap real quick, I think I have Dallas sliding into the 8th seed, and I have Atlanta sliding into the 8th seed. So now we move on to the actual playoffs. And we have the 1-8 on both sides. And let me tell you, the 1-8 on both sides is not going to be a matchup. I see both of these series ending up in a sweep. Dallas maybe gets one game off the sheer size and, again, dominance of AD. I think both these series are an easy sweep. OKC and Cleveland have been two of the best teams in basketball. OKC has what some people say is a front runner, what some people say is second in MVP voting in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Dallas does not have an answer for him. Dallas just simply does not have an answer for all the offensive weapons that OKC has. They don't have an answer for Chet. They don't have an answer for Jalen. Obviously, AD can mitigate some of that, but he can't mitigate all three. Now, if we look at Cleveland, again, top to bottom, significantly a better team than Atlanta. They have guys they can throw. They have multiple defenders they can throw at Trae Young to throw him off. And now I won't take anything away from Atlanta. Atlanta does have some good defenders. They have Dyson Daniels, who's in the DPOY running right now. Zachary Richardson is still young. Trying to think if they still have Clint Capella. I don't even know if they still have him down there, but he's a solid defender in the low post. But again, it's not enough. It's nowhere near enough. Both those series are going to be a sweep. I would be very surprised to see either team take one. Again, if AD has some kind of ridiculous 40, 15, and 10, 40, 15, and 8 type night and 3 blocks, Dallas might take one game. Other than that, both these series should be sweeps. Now, going to the next series, I'm actually going to start in the East on this second round series. On the 2-7 series. I have a lot of people saying, and obviously, if you don't know, Celtics fan, but I have a lot of people saying that they're very nervous about the Orlando Magic, and I understand it because we lost them in the regular season. And as I said before, I don't think this team's place in the playoffs is really indicative of what this team is because they lost guys. They lost Franz Wagner for a long time. They lost Paolo Banchero for a long time. They lost a couple other guys for a while. They had key pieces that weren't playing. That being said, those guys, Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero, are not like defensive stalwarts. They're both great offensive players. They're both lacking on the defensive end. They have Jalen Suggs, who's a really good defensive guard, but he kind of lacks on the offensive end. And I feel like that's kind of the theme for this Orlando Magic team, where they have a bunch of guys who are either really, really good offensively or really, really good defensively, but they don't have a lot of super, super solid two-way players. And I think that's going to be the downfall is the Celtics are literally all two-way players. Top to bottom, aside from a couple of guys, they're all two-way players. Like, they can all excel in offense, and they're all at least above-average defenders, depending on what you want to call Peyton Pritchard. But That's honestly just because he's undersized. It's not because he's not a good defender. He's just undersized. That being said, I mean, again, people are telling me to worry, and I don't. I'm not worried about this team at all. I think they'll win one, and I think what will happen is they'll win the first game in Boston, and then we'll give them the old gentleman sweep, and then say goodbye to Orlando. I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think that this is going to be a team that's experienced enough or versatile enough to actually give us a real run in a playoff series. So yeah, they might get one, but after that, it's a gentleman sweep. Now moving to the West, this is an interesting series. This is a very interesting series. We have the young, very talented, very explosive Houston Rockets team versus the old, kind of slow, but very experienced Golden State team. So like you look at the Houston Rockets core, they have Fred VanVleet, and then everyone else is super duper young. They're led by Jalen Green and Jabari Smith and Alperen Sengun and whichever Thompson twin they have, because I always forget where the Thompson twins are. But they're a very young, very inexperienced team. I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure most of that Rockets core, this is going to be their first playoff experience. These guys have not been here before. And obviously they had an amazing regular season under head coach Ime Udoka. And I think Udoka had a huge part in getting them to where they are. But they're very inexperienced and they're very young. That being said, they're also incredibly athletic. In maybe the most athletic team in the league. But they have to guard Steph Curry. Simple as that. They have to guard Steph Curry. We know what Steph can do in the playoffs. And as much as I hate it, we've seen what Jimmy Butler does in the playoffs. Both of those guys turn into completely different people when they get into the playoffs. And I think you look at some of the defensive matchups that you're going to see for Houston, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do because they don't necessarily have a ton of ridiculous defensive stoppers at the guard position. So do they take is it Amen? I think they have Amen and Asars on Detroit. But you look at Amen Thompson, does he guard Steph? And then who guards Jimmy? I mean, I guess you have Dylan Brooks too, so I guess you put one of them on Steph and then the other one on Jimmy, and then you figure it out from there. But then there's also guys like, well, I was going to say Pods, but Pods isn't really going to do anything. But, Kuminga. You have Jonathan Kuminga, who might not be the most consistent player, but he could show up and score 25 on a night. So this one's going to be really interesting. And I could see it going either way. I think this goes to at least 6. This series, I think, will go to at least 6. Because, again, I think there's a lot of firepower in the Warriors, and there's a lot for them to prove. And I think that they're going to be able to keep up with the Rockets' scores, and they're really going to give the Rockets defenders a hard time. I think when you have a guy like Dylan Brooks, who is that, I poke the bear and I get under people's skin, he's not going to get under Jimmy Butler or Draymond Green's skin, and they're going to be giving everything he's dishing out. They're going to be returning back to him tenfold. I think this goes to 6, and I think the Warriors upset the Rockets. And again, it's Steph Curry. It's really hard to bet against Steph Curry until he's until he's a corpse of himself and not doing anything. It's so difficult to bet against Steph Curry. So I think this goes to 6, maybe 7. I think the Warriors come out on top, and that's the first upset we see in the playoffs. Okay. So we're going to go on. We're going to go to the 4-5 matchups, I think. Yeah, we're going to go 4-5 matchups. I don't have much structure, but I'm just talking. So 4-5 matchups. Start in the East again, because I don't think that's as exciting of a playoff series as what we're going to see out West. So 4-5, we have Indiana and Milwaukee. Now, this is Milwaukee with whom we assumed was going to be without Dame, and now there's all these reports saying that his issues are all done. Now, nothing has come out and said he's definitely going to play. I think they said 100% Game 1 he won't play, but there's reports already saying he could play in Game 2, and I think that makes this a different series. It makes it a much more interesting series for sure. But this one is going to come down to one guy on the Bucks. We all know who it is. I don't know why I'm being coy, but it's Giannis. It's Giannis. If Giannis is Giannis, then the Bucks have a very good chance at winning. However, if there's any team that matches up really well with the Bucks, it's probably the Pacers. They have Pascal, who's lanky and very good at defense. They've got Miles Turner, who's a great defensive anchor in the back. Then they have a couple other guys you can throw at him. Obviously, maybe not the greatest defenders, but they have a lot of length on that team that really can disrupt Giannis. But we've also seen like these guys came alive in the playoffs last year. Halliburton is slowly turning into one of the better offensive engines. I won't say offensive players, but often in terms of guys who can run an offense, he's starting to get towards the top of the league. Like, let's be honest here. What this guy can do with the ball in his hands is pretty incredible, and the way that he runs an offense is getting to that elite level. Now, I think what the biggest issue with this Indiana team, though, is that they have Halliburton, they've got Siakam, they've got Benedict Mathurin, they have Miles Turner, they have all these guys, but none of those guys are like a de facto number one, go get us a bucket type guy. And if Dame is playing especially, that's what they're going to be missing. I feel like in this league, and again, yes, these guys came alive last year, and Halliburton kind of was that number one guy, but he's not, again, I don't think, at least to me, he's not someone you just say, here, take the ball, go get us a bucket, and that's all we need, we're going to score, Dame is that guy. You know what I mean? Giannis can be that guy. I mean, and Giannis might not do it in the most flashy way. He might just run at you and dunk the ball. But hey, 2 points is 2 points, right? And so at the end of the day, I think that's just going to be so much. And again, this all, if Dame plays, it's a different series. I think if Dame plays and he's healthy and he's playing well, it's such a different. This could go 5. Milwaukee could win this in 5 if they have that. If not, there's definitely going to be games where that Halliburton scoring 16, 17, and Siakam having 17, 18, and Miles Turner has 14, and Benedict Mathurin has 15, and all those guys just scoring a little bit is going to weigh on the Bucks, and they're not going to be able to focus on one guy and lock them down, so you're going to have to guard the whole team. And I think that's going to be what really is going to hurt Milwaukee in the series. That being said, if Dame plays and he's healthy, I honestly think Milwaukee could win this in 5. If not, I think this series probably goes 7. Just for the simple fact of there's a lot of inconsistency in both teams. Obviously, like, Kuzma is there, but like Kuzma could give you 30 or he could give you 10. He's very inconsistent. He's not an amazing shooter either. So he's not exactly going to space the floor for a guy like Giannis. And then obviously you have Brook Lopez, Brook Lopez, we've seen him have great performances, but he's also super old. He's definitely lost a step. So I don't know. This is going to be kind of a weird series. I think this is going to be a series not a lot of people are really paying attention to, and kind of for good reason, because I think it's going to be a back and forth series, but it's going to be one of those series that could go 7 games, and all 7 games are going to be boring. Like, all 7 games are just not going to be fun to watch. So, like I said, I think if Dame comes back and he's healthy, Milwaukee could legitimately win it in 5. I think if he comes back and he's not 100%, which he probably won't be 100%, or if he doesn't come back at all, I think this goes 6-7, and I think Indiana takes it without having the shot creation of Dame there. But if he does come back and he is Dame, I think Milwaukee probably takes this one in 5. Moving over to the West. Now, this is probably going to be the most interesting series that we see, at least in the early rounds, is Denver and LA. I mean, let's be honest here. Let's be really, really honest with ourselves. I know they have Harden. I know they have Kawhi. I think a very, very large majority of people had kind of written the Clippers off at this point. Last year they had Russ, Kawhi, PG, and Harden. And they lost PG this year, which was a blessing in disguise. Russ went somewhere else, another blessing in disguise. And they filled the roster with decent players. They got Daniel Jones Jr., who's decent. They still have Zubac over there running the center for them. They picked up KPJ. I think they picked up KPJ. Someone that might not be right, but I'm pretty sure it is right. So they definitely picked up some solid pieces to put around those 2 stars. But I think a lot of people kind of wrote these guys off as, okay, they tried it. They failed a bunch. They're done. But they looked really good this year. Way better than I think a lot of people gave him credit for. I think Harden looked really good this year. I think he looked a little bit better than he looked like when he was in Philadelphia. Kawhi was a little bit better in the games that he played this year, and I think I would have to check, but I'm pretty sure he played more games this year as well. So this is going to be a really interesting series because the Nuggets have been basically dragged to the playoffs by the best basketball player on the planet, Nikola Jokic. And now, this is a team, though. This Nuggets team is a team we've seen where a lot of these guys do step up in the playoffs. We've seen Jamal Murray step up in the playoffs before. We've seen MPJ be more of a shot creator in the playoffs before. Christian Brown has been playing really well lately. But again, we've also seen these guys kind of fall short and then kind of had to get dragged by the coattails of Nikola Jokic, who, by the way, is the MVP, not Shea. But this is going to be a super interesting series because I'm wondering what LA will do defensively against Jokic. Because you have Zubac, who's a big body, who's not a bad defender by any means, but I also wouldn't put him in an elite category defensively. And obviously you have Kawhi, who's one of the greatest defenders of all time. Now, obviously, there's a huge size difference between Jokic and Kawhi, so I don't think you make Kawhi the primary defender, but I think it's got to be pretty close. Kawhi's going to guard Jokic quite a bit this series, just because he's so smart and so talented defensively. It would make sense. Wouldn't make any sense for him not to. And Kawhi's Kawhi. He's going to get his buckets. Obviously he's not the super flashy player, and you have Harden to kind of carry the offensive load for you. He can still kind of do that at this point in his career. With some other guys chipping in here and there and making headway against this team. Really, what it's going to come down to I really think the kind of key person in this. Obviously, we know what Jokic is going to do. I think we know what Kawhi is going to do. We know what Harden's going to do. I think it's going to come down to Jamal Murray in this series, because if Jamal Murray can at least keep pace with a guy like Harden scoring wise, and I'm not saying necessarily bucket for bucket, but if he can at least stay in the vicinity of what Harden's doing on offense, I think the Nuggets have a really, really, really good shot in this series. That being said, like I said before, we've seen Jamal Murray come alive in the playoffs and hit big shots, but we've also seen him completely disappear. I think that what separates Murray from being an elite guard in this league versus a really good guard is that consistency when it matters, is showing up and consistently being a playoff performer versus, again, he's hit some really big shots. He hit some shots when they won the title. He's hit some shots in the playoffs before, some very big clutch time shots. He's also completely disappeared in very big games. It's just true. He's completely disappeared in a lot of big games. So this one's probably going to be, again, the most exciting series from these early series. I think this goes 7. I think this for sure goes 7. I think there's just so much talent on both of these teams that I would be hard pressed to see it not go to 7 games. And again, I think this is going to be one of the I wouldn't say one of. I think this is going to be the most fun matchup in this first round of the playoffs to watch. But I think it goes 7. I'm going to give it to Denver. I'm going to say it goes 7. I'm going to go in favor of Denver just because Jokic is the best player, and I think he's good enough to will this team past the Clippers, to get past that defensive presence of Kawhi, get past the offensive playmaking of James Harden. I think he's good enough to really push him past it. Now moving on here, and I'm going to start in the East. We have the Knicks versus the Pistons. The interesting part about this series is that the Pistons are here. Because the Pistons last year were one of the worst teams in the league, if not the worst. And the transformation they've made this year, the rise of Cade Cunningham from potential future star into bona fide all-NBA team, has been amazing. The play of some of the secondary guys in that team, Asar Thompson or Amen, again, cannot tell the difference between the two. Kind of always forget which the other one is. Pretty sure it's Asar. The presence of Beef Stew, who's not necessarily the most talented player there, but he's the enforcer of that team. He's kind of that old school bully that, he's like Draymond for the Warriors. He's the guy who he protects his guys and he fights the battles for his guys. somehow picking up Tobias Harris and winning with Tobias Harris on your team. Don't know how that's possible. The continued underrated play, I'm going to say, of Malik Beasley, who has played well in most of his NBA career and just kind of goes under the radar because he's never really been in the spotlight. And I think that the way he's been playing this year, and especially with him having that 3-point record for a little while, or leading the league in 3-pointers made, I should say, for a little while, kind of put more of a highlight on him this year, which I love to see. I think, Malik Beasley's been not one of my favorite players, but he's been a guy I really like to watch. He's been a guy who I appreciate his game a lot. But just having this team step up and just really take that next jump, the jump to the next level, has been. I mean, if there was an award for most improved team, this team wins it, no doubt. That being said, I think the Knicks win this. I don't know. I won't say they win this handedly. I think this goes to 6, and I think the Knicks win. I think Cat is going to be too much for the Pistons to handle. I think Brunson's going to be too much for the Pistons to handle. I do think that we're going to see some exposure on the Knicks side. I think if Mikal Bridges keeps playing the way he's been playing, we're going to see him get exposed in big minutes. I think OG is going to get exposed a little bit, maybe on the offensive end. But that being said, I think there's too much defense on the Knicks side. You have, Mitch Robinson's coming off the bench now. Josh Hart's always just a solid guy to have in any lineup. I just think that the Knicks are going to be too much for the Pistons to handle in this series. I think this goes probably 6. I think the Pistons can win 2. I think this goes 6, and I think the Knicks walk out of there with a victory. Now going to the final matchup of the first round is Lakers T-Wolves. This is a very interesting one because a lot of people consider Anthony Edwards the face of the league now versus LeBron, who was the face of the league for the last 20 years. I don't know if this is going to be as interesting as some people think it's going to be. I think Luka versus Ant's going to be kind of fun to watch. I think that seeing a guy like Austin Reeves and seeing him show out is going to be fun to watch. I just don't think the Timberwolves have what it takes to handle both Luka and LeBron. I think obviously they have Jaden McDaniels, who's a great defender, but I don't think he's enough to slow LeBron. Maybe slow him down. He's not enough to contain LeBron, and I think that Luka this year, especially after the comments that were made during his trade, he's on a mission. I think the fact that he's on a mission because of those comments. He's looking to get revenge after last year losing in the finals to the Celtics, especially because the biggest highlighted reason that the Mavericks lost that series wasn't just that the Celtics were a better team. It was Luka's defensive effort, and I think that's a big reason that led to that trade too. But that's neither here nor there. But I think also the other part is that, like, I feel like when you play with LeBron at this point in his career, I won't even say that's LeBron. I will say when you play with a guy in the NBA that's this long into their career, you kind of push a little bit more because you know that, like, this guy probably only has X amount of years left. We want to get him that last ring, or we want to get him a ring in some guy's case. So I think that that's kind of another motivating factor for a lot of these guys is that, you really want to push. The Lakers are going to have a tough time in the playoffs in general because of their lack of size, but I think Julius Randle doesn't super duper affect that. He's not super big. He obviously can do some damage inside, but I think if you put LeBron or Vando on him, that's going to be fine. And obviously Rudy Gobert is basically a nothing on offense. So unfortunately, I don't think the Timberwolves are going to have enough. I think this is going to be a very, very tough carry job for Ant Edwards. I think this does go 6-7 just because of the effort that we're going to see from Ant Edwards and the production we'll see. And I'm sure Julius Randle will have 1 or 2 25-plus, 10-plus rebound games. You know what I mean? 25 and 10 type games. He'll have at least 2 of those this series. That's just what he does. But I don't think they're going to have enough to get past LA. I don't think they're going to have to get past Luka and LeBron, plus that supporting cast. So I have LA in this one. I think it goes 6. So LA in 6 there. So now we are looking at the next matchup. So the second round matchups going forward. We would be seeing Boston and New York. I think I have that right. Boston and New York, and then we would be seeing Cleveland and Milwaukee. On the other side, we would see OKC, Denver, and we would see Golden State, LA. Oh, you know what? I didn't even think about that. That's another reason Golden State and LA will play is because they are 100% going to try to push for a LeBron Steph in the playoffs again. Okay, so yeah, getting on to the semifinals, we would have Cleveland and Milwaukee in the East, and we would have Boston and New York. We would also have on the West OKC and Denver, and then Golden State and LA. Oh, hold on. Maybe I'm wrong. No, I'm right. Okay. Okay, yeah. So, starting in the West. Actually, no. I'm going to start in the East. Cleveland, Milwaukee. I don't think it's going to be a good series. I think Milwaukee is sort of getting... To be honest, I think Milwaukee's getting to the end of its tenure. Whether that comes with Giannis playing out the rest of his career there and them kind of having mediocre success and then he either stays there and retires there, or if he requests a trade. There have been rumors that he's going to request a trade for years now, and I could 100% see him doing so. I just feel like that the makeup of that team has always been really strange, and I think they're in a place right now where they are tied to what they have, and it's going to be really difficult for them to actually improve the roster. I think they made the trade for Dame to please Giannis and keep him there for a few more years, but if it doesn't work out, he's probably going to go somewhere else and try to win again. And I just don't see him winning in Milwaukee again. I think, obviously, as far as the matchups go, the Cavaliers are just so talented. They have so much depth. They have and I mean that front court. They have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley just giving Giannis absolute hell. And I just don't think Giannis and Dame are enough to get past that Cleveland team. They'll win a game. I think this goes 5. I think Cleveland wins in 5. I think Cleveland's going to have the first 2 rounds we see Cleveland play are going to be really, really easy. Like, really, really. I think they're going to cruise past these guys. So, yeah, I think in 5 games, I just think that they're too much for Milwaukee, and Milwaukee's not going to be able to hold a candle to them. Now to the other series. And Fonz, if you watch this, which you better, I want you to pay attention. I want you to really listen to this part. Celtics in 5. Celtics in 5. I'm sorry, Celtics in 5. When the Knicks play good teams, they don't play well. They don't. The Celtics match up way too well against the Knicks. Derek White, Drew Holiday, going to give Jalen Brunson absolute hell. They're going to expose OG and Mikhail as guys who just aren't offensive creators. And then JT, KP, Al are going to absolutely cook Cat. And I don't think that they're going to have the firepower to really keep up with the Celtics, and I don't think they're going to have the consistency to stay there. Jalen Brunson will probably have a couple games, but I think what the Celtics really are going to do is they're going to actually really take it to Cat. They're going to really expose him on defense. They're going to really, really, really give him a tough time on offense, and that's going to lead to the Knicks falling in 5. Yep, I said it. Celtics in 5. I said it. So the 1 and 2 seed in the East, I think, are both going to have really, really, really easy playoff matchups this year. Now, don't get me wrong. I before I cruise past this, I do think that the Celtics and Knicks will be a good series. I think the games will be good. I think the Celtics still win in 5. Sorry, Fonz. So I think, first 1 and 2 seed in the East, I think are going to have a pretty easy time in the playoffs this year. I just think that the East is kind of weird this year, where it is kind of top heavy, And I think the Cavs and the Celtics have just separated themselves from the rest of this conference. So, I mean, you just look at those two teams. It's like it's not even close. They're so much deeper. They're so much more talented. They do literally everything better than just the rest of this conference. Before I get into those two, let's head out east. OKC, Denver. This has the makings of being the... I mean, I think this and we'll talk about the conference finals for next round, has the makings of being the best series this entire playoffs. I feel like OKC is going to have a very tough time handling Nikola Jokic because they don't have that distinct stopper. But I think OKC just has too much for Denver to handle. Between Shea and J-Dub and Chet and all those other guys over there in OKC, there's so much for OKC to do. There's so much they do really well. It's going to be interesting because this is obviously the 1-2 for the MVP race. It'll also be interesting to see how that whistle blows in Shea's favor and how the league handles this, because if the league is pushing for a Shea MVP, they're gonna want it to be justified, right? So they're gonna want to make sure that OKC is winning this series. That being said, I think that Denver actually does kind of match up okay with OKC, but I think the talent, when you look at, obviously Shea is better than Murray, J-Dub is better than MPJ. Say what you... I think Lou Dort's probably a better overall player than Christian Braun. It's pretty close. I think Braun's better offensively, but Lou Dort is significantly better defensively. So I think when you look at that, I think OKC, again, just has too much firepower for Denver to handle. I think that the way that they play, and obviously, again, if Shea is getting his Shea whistle, it's going to be really tough for Denver. But I do think, that being said, this is still going to be an intense series. I think it goes 6 or 7 games easily. But I do think OKC walks out of there with a dub. I think it's just going to be way too much. I don't think Jokic is going to be, especially after going what I predicted is 6 or 7 with LA. I think he's going to be a little bit worn down. I don't think he's going to have it in him to really pull that team past OKC. So unfortunately for the Nuggets, I do have OKC winning that game. Again, probably in 6 or 7 though. And I do, like I said, I think that's going to be one of the more fun series to watch, obviously with Shea doing his thing and Jokic doing his thing. But moving on from them, we have what will probably be the most... how do I say this? Because I don't know if it's going to be the most fun to watch. Maybe the most important, because you're going to have Steph Curry versus LeBron James again in the playoffs. And obviously we know the history between these two guys. We know that they've been basically the leaders of their generation right now, whether it be in battling in the playoffs or the play-in or obviously championships. It's going to be electric, I think. And it's going to be super interesting because Golden State has the pieces to limit the Lakers. They have Jimmy. They have Draymond. They have a bunch of guys they can throw at LeBron. They have a bunch of guys they can throw at Luka. LA doesn't really have a Steph stopper. Like, that's what's going to be really unfortunate for LA is who's guarding Steph this series. Luka can guard him from a size standpoint. Austin Reeves can guard him from a size standpoint, but neither of those guys are ball stoppers. Neither of those guys are guys who can go out and chase Steph Curry around. So ultimately it's going to be, what do the Lakers decide to do? Do they actually try to stop Steph or limit Steph? Which would be the wrong thing, by the way. Or do they just let Steph do what he's going to do and say, well, we're going to see if Jimmy can beat us. We're going to see if Kuminga can beat us. Which is probably what they'll do if we're being realistic. And in that case, I think it's going to be kind of tough. Because I think that, again, it's going to be really hard for them to slow down LeBron and Luka. They have the personnel to do it. They have the personnel to give him a really difficult time. But it's still LeBron and Luka. They're still going to do what they're going to do. They still have a really good supporting cast around them. And again, that lack of height that LA has, it's not really going to come into play against the Warriors. There's not that looming presence there's not that looming low post inside scoring presence. There's not, it really isn't there for Golden State. So I don't think that really comes into play as much as it should. And I know I'm looking back and saying I said they're going to have a tough time in the playoffs because of their lack of size. But, now that I'm looking at who they're playing, I don't know if it's going to. I just really don't know if it's going to. That being said, this, again, I think is a series that goes to at least 6, probably 7, with the history between those two stars. I do think the Lakers are going to be able to just barely squeak by. I do think they'll be able to outplay them. I think there's going to be, enough games where Draymond gets thrown out of the game or just isn't producing at a high enough level to push them past, or there's going to be a game or two where Jimmy doesn't produce at a high enough level on the offensive end to get them past the Lakers. So that's why I think the Lakers have just enough offensively to get past the Golden State Warriors. So I would put the Lakers here in probably 6 or 7. Going on to the conference finals, Cavs, Celtics, Thunder, Lakers. I think this makes sense. I think these are probably the biggest contenders in the league. I'm going to start in the West this time, though. Thunder Lakers is very interesting. The Thunder are a younger, more athletic team who are deeper and a little bit more, I don't want to say a little bit, they're pretty versatile. The Lakers have experience. They have star power on their team. Luka and LeBron are bigger stars than just Shea. But they also have more drive, I think. They have more want. They have more reason to win this year. Again, LeBron has 4 rings. He's lost 6 times in the finals. Every ring he wins pushes him further in his chase to be the GOAT, which some people say he is. I might be one of those people, but that's neither here nor there. Luka lost last year in the finals and then was traded by the team he thought he was going to spend his career with. He's hungry for a ring. LeBron's hungry for a ring. Austin Reeves could be hungry for a ring. They have more drive than this Thunder team. But the Thunder, I think, are just too deep. They're way too much for the Lakers to handle this year. Obviously, with some of the guys they have, now we're actually going to see that size, that lack of size, I should say, come into play for LA. However, there's one saving grace. One minute detail that could save the Lakers season here in this series. And that's the league. Because what is the best, most historical, most meaningful matchup that the league, whose ratings have been down, could have in the finals? It's not Thunder Cleveland. I'll tell you that right now. It's not Thunder Cleveland. It's not OKC Boston. It's not Lakers Cleveland. Though that would be cool, seeing LeBron go against Cleveland in the finals. It's LA versus Boston. If the league wants to have a meaningful, historical championship game, championship series, it's LA versus Boston. That is what could save the Lakers this series. That being said, taking the league out of it, removing that presence from this series, I think OKC wins this in 6. I think by the time they get to the conference finals, I think LeBron is going to be, he's 40. He's going to be worn out. I think that Luka is going to be having a tough time. We saw him slow down a little bit in the finals last year. I think that OKC is a team that's going to be able to expose some of the defensive discrepancies in the Lakers team. And I think they're going to be a team that can actually attack that lack of height, the lack of size that the Lakers have. So I do think it's going to be OKC in 6. Now, to the East, to my Celtics. Celtics Cavs. In terms of the Eastern Conference, will by far be the most exciting and be the best playoff series. And I won't sit here and say I'm not biased. I won't sit here and say I don't think the Celtics are going to win. Do I think there's a chance Cleveland could win? Me, personally, no. Do I actually think there's a chance if I remove my bias? Yes, of course I think there's a chance. This Cleveland team is incredibly talented. They've shown that they're one of the best teams in the league. They've shown they can beat the Celtics. They beat us in the regular season. That being said, we have the experience. We have the championship pedigree. I think we have the better head coach. But it's really close. These teams, talk about two teams who are close to each other in terms of what they can do, in terms of versatility, their scoring, their everything. These teams are so close. Their depth. I think what it's going to come down to is, can Evan Mobley or whoever they decide is going to be the primary defender on Tatum, can he slow Tatum down? And because I think, it's so tough. Can he slow Tatum down, but can the Cavs disrupt the Celtics' three-point shot? That's what it comes down to. Because when the Celtics are hitting threes, they're quite literally unbeatable. If the Celtics are hitting from three, you can't win. You might as well give up the game. That being said, as a Celtic fan, I have more than once thrown things across the room because my team was shooting 45 threes in a half. Because my team was shooting 3,000 threes in a goddamn game. Sorry. But if they are hitting, you're not going to be able to guard that team. I think between Derek White and Drew Holiday, who admittedly has slowed down a step but is still a great defensive guard, they're going to give Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell a really tough time. And then obviously you throw Jaylen Brown into that mix as well too, especially on Donovan Mitchell. I think it's going to be super interesting to see how the health of KP comes into play, if he can stay healthy throughout the playoffs. But in all honesty, without being biased, I do think this is a 6 or 7 game series. I do think the Celtics are able to come out on top. I really do. And again, call me biased. I think the Celtics are the best team in the league. You can call me biased or whatever, but I think they're the best team in the league, and I think they've shown it. So now, that brings us to the end, the finals, the Thunder versus the Celtics. Shea versus Tatum. I think, and again, you can call me biased if you want, I think the Celtics win. I honestly think the Celtics are going to make another championship run. I think that they understand where their team sits right now, and they understand that with the second apron looming, there's a good chance that this team doesn't look the same next year. There's a good chance that there's a key player who's gone, whether it be Drew or KP. I think they understand that the reality of the situation is that there's a very good chance that this team does not look the same coming back next year, and I think that they understand that by removing a player like either of those guys, it's going to take away from the chances they can win again. I think JB is playing with a chip on his shoulder. I think he's still looking at that USA snub, the Team USA snub, and saying, I'm going to prove that I can be the guy. JT is playing with a chip on his shoulder. He's looking back what happened last year in the finals and seeing JB win conference finals MVP and seeing him win finals MVP. And now all these people are saying, well, JT's not that guy. He's, JB's actually the best Celtic, even though JT led us in every single category statistically. He's gonna play with it. He wants to show that he can be the guy. He wants to come out and show he can be the guy. So realistically, I do think this goes. I still think this is a very good series. I think OKC is still a very talented team. I think the Celtics win this in 6. I think they come out. I think they show why they're the best team in the league. I think JT shows why he's a top 3 player in this league. Yeah, I said top 3 player in this league. And I also think just as versatile and deep as OKC is, I think that Boston is a little bit more versatile. I think a lot of our guys are more two-way than what we see in OKC. And I think that's going to be the biggest deciding factor. But again, we also have Joe Mazzulla, who's a psychopath, who will probably do some sort of ritual to make sure we win before the game. And we've been there. We've been there. We were there last year. We know what it's like to play in a championship game. OKC doesn't. I think that's going to be people might think that's not going to matter. I think that matters. I think that's a huge factor. A huge factor in a championship series is that we've done this before. We've been here. This is the second time we were in a championship. We've won it once. We lost once. But we've been here before. OKC hasn't. That is why, to wrap up, Kearns' playoff prediction, Celtics winning the chip in 6 over AKC. Over OKC. Can you tell I've been recording for a while? That's right. Celtics in 6. I said it. It's over with. Argue with your mama. Thank you for watching this video. And one more time, please make sure you follow us and subscribe on Twitch. Subscribe to us on YouTube. And join our Discord for some great conversations about sports and gaming and cards and jerseys and everything. But thank you for watching once again. This has been Kearns with JDF Sports.